right, welcome everyone. We are going to get our program started. We are so happy to welcome you today to Why Menthol, Why Now? And we are going to get our program started. Um, so my name is Tracy Brown, and I'm waiting for my my co-presenter, Tracy uh, Tracy Williams from San Jose Alumni Chapter, to come on. Here she is. All right, welcome, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tracy Williams. I am the president of the San Jose Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
And I am Tracy Brown, and I am the project manager and proud member of the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council, known much more casually as the AATCLC. I want to first start by once again welcoming everyone who made it out this evening. We are so happy to have such a wonderful turnout and to welcome you to such an important conversation. I also want to take a moment to welcome our public officials who have shared with us that they were going to be here tonight. So I want to welcome members of the Office of the Vice Mayor, Chappie Jones. We are so happy you were able to join us. Office of the Council Member, Pam Foley. And I believe Pam might be on the line. I remember you from back in the day when I was working with Brenda Fikes at San Jose State. So I'm so glad to see you still active in the San Jose community. Also, we want to welcome members of the Office of Council Member Deb Davis, as well as members of the City Council from San Leandro and the Mayor's Office of San Leandro, and also the proud members of the Silicon Valley Black Chamber of Commerce. We are so happy to have you here. Please know that you are always welcome at any of our events, and please look to the AATCLC as an information resource for you as you are learning about this very important issue.
And so on behalf of the San Jose Alumni Chapter, I would like to say echo and thank you for logging in for this education forum. We are partnering tonight with the African American Community Service Agency to bring to the community important information from the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council, which will include presentations from Dr. Philip Gardner, Carol Magruder, and Dr. Valerie Yerger. We will also have Paula Baker from the Santa Clara County Department of Public Health share some important information specific to residents in Santa Clara County. So let me briefly talk about why this event is necessary. The tobacco industry has used menthol as a way to attract and keep African Americans addicted to cigarettes. According to 2018 California Health Interview Survey, almost 70% of adult African American smokers in California smoke menthol cigarettes, which is the highest amount of any group. So that is a problem and can be a devastation to families, especially to those who have lost loved ones from diseases such as lung cancer due to years of smoking. So tonight you will be armed with a lot of information. So please get your pen and paper together and be prepared to take down a lot of notes.
Exactly.
And without any further ado.
Actually, before you introduce Sora Roberts, I am so sorry, Sora Williams. I was so excited about welcoming people that I forgot to welcome a few other very important guests.
Okay.
We have some members from the broader tobacco control community here, and we have some other members of the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council. So thank you to everyone who is able to join us, and of course other ones of my sorors from the fabulous Far West region of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
And with that, and so as you're taking your notes, I want to encourage you that throughout the presentations, if you have questions, we want you to use the Zoom features of chat to keep track. We do have people who are going to pull those questions, and when we get to the part of our program for community discussion, we're going to grab those questions. So we want you to be able to put your comments in chat, put your questions in chat, and keep yourself muted during the presentations. And so we wanted just to be mindful of those Zoom rules. And so now I'm going to introduce I'm a member of the San Jose Alumni Chapter, who's the chair of our Social Action Committee, Minister Soror Virginia Roberts, who will bring us the blessing for this evening.
Thank you. We acknowledge the Tamian and the Muwekma Ohlone peoples that first lived on this land called San Jose. For thousands of years, they cared for the land in a way that honored all beings and all that exists. Settler colonizer seized the land, kidnapped or killed many of the people, and destroyed the indigenous way of life. Some of these harms continue to this day. Acknowledgement of this history is the first step to building mutual respect and connection, truth and reconciliation, transformation and solidarity are essential to creating a loving path forward and to heal our planet. So we acknowledge the legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that are woven into our own current place and way of being. And we pledge anew to support our indigenous kin. Shall we pray? Loving God, we have not been good stewards of the world that you have given us to look after. We confess and repent of all the ways in which we have misused your creation. Teach us how to care for it with wisdom, compassion, and dignity, and to pass on to our children a world that is in some degree better for our having lived in it. Show us, dear Creator, how to protect your creation, not just the plants and animals, but the soil, air, and water by which we live, so that nobody may exploit or pollute them for private profit or convenience. Help us to cherish these necessities for our survival and guide those in authority to ensure that the human spirit may not be starved in pursuit of material comfort and wealth. We pray for those who are working to end disease and human suffering. Be close to them when they face obstacles of bureaucratic obstruction, corporate greed, and the tyranny of prejudice. Support them in every circumstance and crisis, and make your presence known to them in every time of need. Help us do the things we ought to do and not do the things we ought not to do. Oh, please be in all that we say and do on this day. Amen and Ashe.
Okay, so I want to share with you a little bit about how this evening is going to go. We have a wonderful program prepared for you, and I just want to give you an idea of how things are going to look. So let's take a look at our agenda for the evening. First, we've already started with our opening and our blessing. Thank you again, Soror Roberts, for that beautiful invocation. And next, we have had a bit of a shift. We're going to go straight to our Menthol Overview from Carol Magruder, who is the chairperson, who's the director and co-founder of the AATCLC. And then we will hear from Dr. Philip Gardner, who is also a co-chair of the AATCLC. We'll also hear from Dr. Valerie Yerger, who is not only the a co-chair of the AATCLC. She is a co-founder of the AATCLC. She is also the person who was responsible for driving forward the resolution that was brought by Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, the menthol resolution. So she is an important fighter in the tobacco control community, and we're definitely lucky to have her. Then we'll hear from Paula Baker from the Santa Clara County Department of Public Health. And we'll have some community sharing facilitated by our very own Milan Ballantyne from the African American Community Services Agency. Then we'll have a call to action and our closing from our very own, the ATCLC's Nicole Turkson, who is our special programs, special projects liaison. So without further ado, I am going to bring Carol Magruder forward.
Hello, good evening. I'm sharing my screen and hopefully folks can hear me. Yes, somebody just shake your head. Okay. I
Yes.
just want to say how I am so grateful to Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and that I have learned when Delta speak, people listen. And so you have furthered saving our Black people in this country further than we could ever have imagined. And I just want to let you know that I am just profound. I'm not thankful, I'm grateful. And my heart is just so full with our opening prayer, Reverend Virginia. And so we'll get on with it because I just have a few minutes, but you are helping us to save the Black lives that we are trying to save in this country, and it really means a lot. So this is our group here, our council, and so I am a co-chair along with Dr. Phil. Dr. Val is our unofficial third co-chair, and we're the Three Musketeers and have traveled all over this country in this past 10 years to get mentholated tobacco products taken off of the market. And this is us. We are Californians, but working nationally. Regular Black people, like I call us, but researchers, community activists, and most of our people are still with us today. We meet monthly. Most of them are unpaid. I know Dr. Susan Bradshaw's on, and some other people, but I just want to give a shout out to the few that I can. So I just want to say that we are in profound historical pain. It's been a painful year for us, and so we have suffered. And these things that happened with George Floyd and the other killings, that it really it sparks our historical consciousness of the pain that we have endured, and all of that plays into many of the things that are going on with us in terms of our emotional and mental health, and the impact of COVID and all of these things on our community. So we want to affirm that our lives have value, and so before Black Lives Matter was created, our website is savingblacklives.org. This is a slide from Katrina, the way that we were treated so indifferently. And that's kind of how public health and many of our government entities that are supposed to protect us have just treated us indifferently. So this is part of Katrina, those days when we were referred to as refugees, that this wasn't really even our country. And so that Katrina is not that long ago, and we're still seeing these things play out right now. So in the United States, smoking and tobacco related deaths kill more Black people than all of these things combined. All of the things that we think of as problems. 45,000 Black folks die every year from tobacco-induced diseases. In the past 20 years, we have lost almost 1 million Black people to tobacco-induced diseases. And so when I look at the COVID, the chart, the numbers as they were mounting, we were having that every year with tobacco-induced diseases. And so we need to think about it in that way. And I'm actually going to get a counter on our website to count the deaths, because we need to be conscious of it, and we need to really be aware of the profound intergenerational harm that losing the adults and the grandparents in our families, how that destabilizes our families and our community and does us harm. This is a graph just showing graphically the deaths from tobacco compared to homicides and AIDS. We think of homicides as one of our biggest problems, and it is because it's in your face. So when I travel around the country, wherever I am, when I turn on the news in the morning, I get to hear what Black man or brown man was murdered in that city or town that night. But by far, tobacco is killing more people, and it needs to be in our top 5 priorities as a community as we move forward. Addiction Incorporated, this is just a wonderful film that documents how the tobacco industry actually manipulated the products in tobacco to make it more addictive, and that we want to know that addiction is about chemistry, brain chemistry, and access to populations. It's not about that we're just weak and we're just going to do something. It's about these entities making war on us and sprinkling these products in our communities, and people become addicted to us. And there's a documentary on crack, the crack epidemic, that I recommend everybody to watch to relive that. And so there's some misguided African Americans that are saying that Newport menthol cigarettes, that we have a cultural affinity for these products. And I want to say we have no more of a cultural affinity to Newport cigarettes than we do for crack cocaine, and that just as crack was sprinkled in our communities cheap and made available and people became addicted to it, so have we been living the legacy of mentholated tobacco products. So tobacco has to rise above all of these things to get our attention, and we have a lot of issues, and with COVID we have even more, but we have to make space. We have to walk and chew gum at the same time and deal with this issue right now up front. We cannot wait until we get these other things solved to move forward on tobacco, commercial tobacco control. These are some of the boys and young men who break our hearts. I used to update these photos, and it was just so painful. But we see the boys, and particularly for the Bay Area there in the middle is Oscar Grant, and then Trayvon on the left, two of my particular heartbreaks. But for every Black boy that's killed or dies, there's 6 to 8 adults that are dying at home. This is a photo of Philando Castile. So before George Floyd, we had Philando Castile, and many people looked at this picture of his girlfriend, and what I looked at were the Newport cigarettes in her hand and that lighter, and that's that self-medication that we're doing for our stress, the stress on her face. And so many of our people in our inner cities, our urban quote unquote folks who live under tremendous stress. And so, you know, we have a little class thing going on now. So some of us are educated, we have a little privilege, we got health insurance, and we don't have the same type of stress that some of our brothers and sisters who are still living that kind of urban existence do. And this is about fighting for all of us and fighting for our children. So tobacco control has to be more relevant than ever with all of these things. And it has to be a part of the fabric of our lives. It has to be meaningful, and it has to take in all of these other issues that we face. And that's what we're about. That's what the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council is about. So in 2009, President Barack Obama signed the Tobacco Control Act. And at that time, it gave the FDA the authority to regulate cigarettes and the tobacco industry. And at that time, all of the flavors were taken out except for menthol. So menthol was a negotiated deal, and we were a part of that public policy bargaining chip. And you'll hear the flip of that, trying to take menthol out now is doing something to Black people, when it's the exact opposite, that it was left in the first place. That was what was racist. That was how we weren't protecting our children. We weren't protecting these babies by taking the flavors out, the flavor that has been dumped in our community that was meaningful to Black folks. So these are the babies that weren't protected when other people's children were being protected. These children, this is a child. And so even some of our elected officials, the feeling of wanting to protect our young people, it's like our kids can just kind of make it on their own. So this is a picture from Freddie Gray, Baltimore. This boy's probably about 12 or 13, throwing rocks at the police with a cigarette in his mouth. This is my little Sagger baby. And so these are the children that we fight for, along with their parents and grandparents. And so we want to stop trickle down public health policy. And that's where you make it so good for people at the top who have health insurance, who have the wherewithal to advocate and negotiate for their communities. And then it trickles down to the people at the bottom who really need public health policy protections. We are part of an international movement. Is that my time? Okay, I heard somebody. So we're part of an international movement to get menthol taken off the market. And this was an abstract that we submitted at a conference in Singapore in 2012. So that's almost 10 years ago soon. The least of these, U.S. tobacco control policy, mentholated cigarettes, and African Americans. And before Chicago came online and started to actually pass some legislation around regulating this menthol, we actually were planning civil disobedience, myself and Dr. Phil Gardner, and Del Monte Jefferson was going to bail us out in Washington, D.C., but we didn't have to do that because the ordinances started happening, and then we were able to just work it that way rather than really try to draw some attention to this. And so I'm just happy that we're on this call because we need our community to understand and to get out there and to work to get these products out of our communities. So this is a paper, and Dr. Val is on the line. This is Racialized Geography, and Dr. Val is one of the first tobacco industry document researchers. And this information comes from the tobacco industry's own internal documents released through litigation and discovery. So from their own internal memos that they never thought anyone would see, we're able to document how they preyed upon us and their plans. This is Marie Evans, who's our poster child for this process of profiling us, giving out free tobacco products in our community. So in Boston, she was given Newports at 9, addicted at 13, dead at 54. This woman, if she were alive today, she would be my age. So that's the robbery of our people that we have, that people are dying that young when they have so much left to do and to give to our community, to our families. This is Dave Chappelle, the youngest and most famous person that we know, given Newports in Washington, D.C. in the metro when he was 14 years old. And he says, and this is an interview he did, he said he decided he was going to learn how to smoke. And he didn't know, he never dreamed he'd be so successful at it. I'm showing, this is PAVE. So these are our sisters who started the Parents Against Vaping. So from 2018, when the vaping industry targeted middle-class white kids, these women were able to form a national organization. They were able to get a congressional hearing on vaping that we're still waiting to get as African Americans on menthol. 30, 40 years later, 1 million people dead, and we've never had a congressional hearing about menthol. But these women, mothers, managed to get a hearing and to get some legislation on e-cigarettes that we've yet to get for our kids, for our families. So this is an issue of social injustice. The industry targets everyone, but it's just so pernicious in our community, and we have so many other issues to deal with. This graph shows how many lives would be saved if we took menthol off the market. And what we're proposing to do is it would not be illegal to use these products, it would be illegal to sell them. So if you can get them however you want to, that's on you as an individual. But if we simply had 10% of the population get off, which we're aiming for more than that, in 40 years, we could save 91,000 Black people, 237,000 Black people, if only 30%. So that's the sheer numbers, and to document how the success of the targeting of the industry. We're 10% of the population, yet we would make up 30% of the lives saved if we took these products offline. So African Americans are used as a tool to blunt public health policy, not just for us, but for everyone. The industry latches on to our legitimate concerns in this country: racism, police brutality, officer-involved killings, and they flip it. And they say that what we're doing is actually going to criminalize our people and get them killed and profiled by the police. So that's right, Reverend Al Sharpton. His group takes money from Reynolds American Incorporated, that's Newport Cigarettes. This is Eric Gardner in New York, I Can't Breathe, killed in New York
Ms.
for,
Carol,
yes,
we are at 8 minutes.
okay. So my time is up.
Thank you.
Okay, so hold on, I'm going to end in 1 minute. So this is just the unintended consequences that our detractors say, that if we take these products off, but we know that if we do, we will be saving Black lives, and Dr. Phil is going to show. So we passed a state law that the industry is putting a referendum. So we'll be on the ballot in November, and people need to be paying attention because it's the exact opposite of what you're going to be hearing very soon when you start getting the mailers and all of the news about this is a racist law, because the racism was when they left menthol on the market. So I'm going to cede my time. So Dr. Phil, is Dr. Phil next?
Yes, Dr. Phil is
Okay,
next. Thank
all
you.
righty.
Thank
Okay,
you,
you're welcome.
Carol.
Okay.
So thank you, Carol. Are you going to advance the slides, Nicole or Tracy? So I'm recently retired from the University of California Office of the President Tobacco-Related Disease Research Program, and as pointed out, I'm one of the co-chairs of the AATCLC. Next slide. Let me suggest that this is a framework for our time. that menthol cigarettes and flavored little cigars have been and are the main vectors of death and disease in the Black and brown communities and other poor communities of color. The COVID-19 pandemic has just thrown a spotlight on the health disparities and unequal treatment that our poor colored communities have faced for hundreds of years in the United States. At this time, nothing could be more helpful in saving Black lives and showing that Black lives matter than getting menthol cigarettes and flavored little cigars straight out of the Black community. Next slide. Next slide. If you take anything away from what I say today, take this slide away, that in 1952, only 5% of African Americans smoked menthol cigarettes. By 1968, it had almost tripled. By 1976, it had tripled again. By the mid-2000s, it's over 80%, and as has already been pointed out, over 80% of African Americans who smoke menthol cigarettes. Next slide. The key here is that the tobacco industry began to use male actors with more Black features. They tripled cigarette advertising in ebony in places like Jet. They began to use our idiom like Menthol's got a brand new bag, which James Brown had brought about. They became the Cool Jazz Festival. And as Dr. Yerger's great research has shown, unfortunately, that many, not all, but many of our social, political, and religious African-American groups take money from the tobacco industry. Next slide. This is a slide in 1958 for Salem. This is a promotion for Salem, white couple in a meadow. Next slide. By 1963, Elston Howard was selling these products, catcher for the New York Yankees. This, in 1963, is the March on Washington. 1963 is the Birmingham church that gets bombed. The tobacco industry is way ahead of the game. They're putting Black folks out front and up front and putting them in executive positions in North Carolina. Next slide. By the late 60s and early 70s, they've completely taken over. There's a brother with an afro, dashiki, and beads. Next slide. By the mid 1960s, of course, they're into our culture and basketball, alive with pleasure. Next slide. Real, rich, and cool. Winston hopped in the game. Next slide. This is what Carol was talking about. The menthol wars that Valerie wrote about. The punchline here is that they gave away free cigarettes in high traffic areas and known street corners where Black folks congregated. I have to tell the story. I lived in New York City in 1979, came up out the subway one day and there was one of these vans just blaring our music and passing out cool cigarettes. I took my pack of Cools. I was a cool cigarette smoker. Next slide. By the early 80s, Newport became, again, our idiom, fire it up. Next slide. In the early 2000s, it was still cool, it was mellow, and if you can look in the background, you can see the outline of a woman. It's very enticing. Next slide. By 2004, we had the Cool Mix campaign. That was going to be a DJ battle that would have culminated in Chicago. We were able to stop that. Next slide. Each picture that you see on your screen is a pack of Cool cigarettes. These were being marketed in 2003 and 2004 around the Cool Mix campaign. Next slide. So what is menthol and what does it do and what it does? Next slide. Menthol essentially masks the harsh taste of smoking. It has a cooling cessation. It increases throat grab, and mainly, let's be clear, menthol by definition is an anesthetic. It allows for deeper inhalation. The deeper you inhale, the more nicotine and toxins you take in. The more nicotine and toxins you take in, the more addicted you become. Mentholated cigarettes inhibits nicotine metabolism. When nicotine gets to your liver, it becomes cotinine, and cotinine metabolism is slowed down if you have menthol cigarettes compared to if you didn't have menthol cigarettes. Next slide. Independent sensory activation of neurotransmitters. Long story short, menthol smokers get more addicted. Menthol produces more nicotine receptors in the brain compared to people who don't smoke menthol cigarettes. Transbuccal drug absorption. Essentially, if you chew tobacco that has menthol in it, it crosses the gum barrier much more effectively. And probably most problematic is greater cell permeability. If you smoke menthol cigarettes, the smoke penetrates the cell much more effectively if it has menthol in it compared to if it does not. Next slide. The punchline here, this is from the tobacco industry. All tobacco products have some menthol in it. Just the ones that are characterized have a lot more than the other ones. So they have more of the effects that I just talked to you about. Next slide. Melanin is a substance that gives color to our skin. The darker your skin means the more nicotine is stored in your body. Our colleague, Dr. Yerger and Gary King did this some years ago. Next slide. Menthol harder to quit. As you can see from the slide, folks who smoke menthol try more often, but folks who, they're unsuccessful more often too. It's harder to quit. Next slide. Predation. This is the other take-home message. Next slide. The tobacco industry sees this as focused communities and non-focused communities. Focused communities are us, inner city, colored, and poor, while non-focused communities are upscale, suburban, rural, and white. Things are cheaper in our community, and there are more promotions in our community. Next slide. It's a
2
great
minutes,
slide.
Dr. Gardner?
Yes,
2 minutes.
2 minutes. There's a dose-response relationship here, okay? The more Afro-Americans students increase, the proportion of menthol ads increased. Next slide, that's California. Next slide. Oh, back. This is, I'm sorry, the slide is all jumbled up. This is from Massachusetts and Boston, comparing Brookline and Dorchester communities in terms of advertising. There are more ads in Dorchester. There are larger ads in Dorchester. There are more menthol ads in Dorchester. And the price of cigarettes, and I guess this is what pisses me off the most, is 50 cents cheaper. Next slide. Menthol is a sacrificial lamb. We've already talked about that. Next slide. This was a deal with the devil when menthol was excluded. Next slide. Where are we today? It's essentially a hot mess. You can still get refillable vapes and still use disposable vapes that still have all the flavors in them. Menthol is allowed in all tobacco products still. Next slide. Almost done. I won't go through all these major moments, but just to say that in 2020, the FDA was sued by the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council. And we have taken on plaintiffs' action on smoking and health, the American Medical Association, and the National Medical Association. Next slide. Next slide. I'm almost there. So my take-home message to everybody is the disproportionate marketing and targeting of candy-flavored poison to African Americans and other specially oppressed sectors of our society is outright discriminatory and genocidal. Folks who are the poorest, folks who are the least informed, the tobacco industry is preying on the most vulnerable sections of our society. We need to get these products off the shelf now. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. This is what's at stake, folks. And so let me stop there. I want to thank you. Last slide. I want to thank you for all coming out today. And particularly, we have the ability at the local level to get rid of menthol products and stop the sale of them. It will go a long way towards saving Black lives. Thank you very much.
Dr. Gardner?
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Dr. Valerie Yerger.
Okay, give me just a second to pull up my screen. Okay, do you guys see my screen here?
Yes.
Okay. This is a part I don't normally do, but let me get this right. Oops. Okay. Hi, hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience in helping me get this screen up and working. For those of my SOARs who are on the call, welcome. My greetings to those of you who are here to get information that we have to share about our work around tobacco. I just need to give a little bit of background to help you guys understand how important this work is. I'm trained as a naturopathic doctor. I'm licensed in the state to practice medicine. And I was the first non-nurse midwife to be licensed to do home births. And I had an opportunity to work at UCSF on a project looking at these documents, and what I saw really changed my life. And I rededicated my career to trying to expose to our community how the tobacco industry was making a living and these huge profits off the backs of African Americans. So as a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and actually encouraged by my president of my chapter, Berkeley Bay Area alumni, I wrote and submitted a resolution. So this would have been back in 2012 in preparation for our national convention the following July. And this resolution was really calling on the FDA to add menthol to the list of prohibited characterizing flavors used in cigarettes. And it was at this convention, because it was during our centennial, we had over 40,000 SOARs who had registered. And this resolution was read and adopted, and there was not a single objection to it. A few months later, on March 5th, 2014, former Secretary of Health and Human Services, Joseph Califano Jr., and his organization, Citizens Commission to Protect the Truth, hosted a press conference on menthol. Turns out that Joseph Califano knew about the Delta resolution, and so he invited a respected colleague, Dr. Delma T. Daly, as you all know, our past national president. She brought greetings and a message from Dr. Paulette Walker, who at that time was our national president. So since no one can speak on behalf of our sorority but our current national president or her designee, the presence of Dr. Daly at this press conference was huge. And you'll also note that part of her message was that the members of Delta Sigma Theta sorority will do more to educate the members in the communities to take action so that little Black girls and little Black boys may grow up to be healthier. So as years were passing on and still no action on menthol by the FDA, many of us were returning to our recognition that commercial tobacco control has always been much more effective at the local level. So we turned away from the FDA and decided to really focus on supporting those jurisdictions that were trying to take some action on menthol. So what do you think I did? Well, I had to get another resolution, one that would give chapters of our sorority the support to be able to go out and participate in state and local efforts to ban the sale of menthol. Now, this second resolution was not as easy as the first one. For one thing, and I was told this later, the sorority has never had two resolutions on the same topic. One of the reasons this second resolution found its way to the voting delegates, and this was in 2017 when we had our national convention in Las Vegas, is because there were champions working behind the scene, keeping its chances alive. So this resolution too was read and adopted. I actually am showing a slide that came out of a workshop that was conducted during our national convention there in Las Vegas. Our national social action commissioners did a workshop, and part of their workshop focused on the resolution process, and they used our resolution on menthol as a case study. And I'm sitting there, and there must have been 200 SOARs in there. And one of the commissioners saw me and said, "Oh, the author's here." So they had me come up, and it was a great opportunity to give a little bit of background to the SOARs who were there about why this resolution came to be. And it's awfully helpful when we have SOARs who are doing work in tobacco already. This is just several SOARs that I have come across in our work. Some of them you may notice right away. SOAR Regina Benjamin, who at the time was our Surgeon General, is there. You'll notice sitting next to her in the photo on the left side is SOAR Brittany Blackwell, who at the time of this photo was our national second VP. And then over in the right photo, again, you see Dr. Benjamin, but we have two other SOARs, Joycelyn Elders, and who's a former Surgeon General, and then a former acting Surgeon General, our SOAR, Audrey Manley. When San Francisco was working on getting a ban, members from the San Francisco Alumni Chapter came out in support. You'll see that they testified at one of the Board of Supervisors meeting. So as part of the requirement for a year-long leadership program that I was in, the Pearl program, two other members of my cohort and I conducted a virtual community forum to highlight tobacco as an urgent health crisis in the Black community. This was held last May 2020. We were planning this as an in-person event, but because of COVID-19, we had to make it virtual. And it was very, very well attended. These are just some of the guests who came and participated, including our Far West Regional Director, SOAR Tracy Ricard Akins, Congresswoman Karen Bass, and William Scott, who is the chief of the San Francisco Police Department. He was very supportive of the work that we were doing in San Francisco. And then we had tobacco control experts, Dr. Phil Gardner and Carol Magruder, and attorney Sharon Eubanks, who were speakers. I'm finishing up here just to show you that our event was very well attended. We had over 165 SOARs who participated, representing 29 chapters, a majority of which were in the state of California. I put together a breakout room. The green represents the SOARs who participated in that event, where they were located in the state of California. We had breakout rooms that were pre-assigned, and SOARs were assigned to a breakout room based on where they lived or worked geographically. And we also matched them with a local tobacco control advocate just to help them process the information that they had seen and to talk about next steps. So this is something that we've been working on for a number of years. And as Carol said, we're very, very excited that we're picking up momentum in our state. And I'll turn it back over. And I'm assuming everyone saw my slides. I didn't ask. I didn't hear any objections.
Your slides were in view, so you're good.
Good. All right. Thank you very much. So we'll move on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Val, our beloved Dr. Val. I know she's Dr. Yerger, but we all call her Dr. Val, Dr. Phil, and Dr. Carol and Carol for those wonderful presentations. There have been a number of people who have been asking whether or not the slides will be shared, and they will indeed. So Tracy, I think this is the part. This is the part where Tracy introduces Miss Paula. Tracy's like, wait a minute.
The Tracy with the Y.
The Tracy with the right. We got TNT in the house. Okay, 2 T's. So at this time, I want to bring forward our wonderful friend of the AATCLC and a strong community partner from the Santa Clara County Department of Public Health. We have Paula Baker. She is a tobacco control advocate, has been for a number of years, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about the tobacco control landscape here in San Jose.
Thank you, Tracy. I am so honored to be here today and to be sharing information on the same dais as Dr. Phil, Dr. Val, Carol, and yourself. Yeah, I've been working with the Department of Public Health in a variety of positions, but the position that's closest to my heart, I believe, is this position in terms of anti-tobacco work. And that's because you know, my father's entire generation out of 13 kids was pretty much wiped out by tobacco-related diseases. And I too was a young smoker, and and anything that we can do to stop children and a new generation of young people from becoming addicted to nicotine is something that, especially when we're focusing on our community, the African American community. Now we have the double threat of COVID-19, which is affecting our community 3 times as much in terms of fatalities. And in addition, but before it came along, and menthol tobacco. I'm just going to go over the burden of tobacco use here in Santa Clara County. I'm sharing from the Health Equity Tobacco Report, and it will be available. Tracy said she'll put it out to everyone who's participated. One of the interesting things about California is that since the late 1990s and early 2000s, when the anti-tobacco work took off, there's been a huge decline in smoking in the state of California overall. And I think this state may be the second lowest state in the country. We know it's declined by about 49%. And yet the rate of smoking, while it might be small, it is devastating for the small African-American population that exists here in Santa Clara County and other populations throughout the state. Approximately 10% of adults in Santa Clara County currently smoke cigarettes, and the smoking rates are higher among certain populations. For example, 15% of Vietnamese adults smoke cigarettes, including 31% of Vietnamese men. 32% of Filipino men smoke cigarettes. 11% of African Americans smoke cigarettes, and 11% of Latinos smoke cigarettes. Well, that 11% of African Americans who smoke is devastating. We're only 2%, 2 to 3% of the population here. And so we should be hovering around that percentage point rather than at 11%. So we have a lot of work to do to get that percentage down and to prevent young people from taking up this ugly, horrible genocidal habit. There is cigarette smoking, also varies by educational level. 15% of adults with a high school education or less are current smokers, compared with only 6% of adults with a college degree or higher level of education. Cigarette smoking varies dramatically by household income levels. For example, 15% of residents who earn less than $15,000 a year smoke, compared to just 7% for residents earning $75,000 a year or more. Smoking rates are even higher, 17%, for those earning between $35,000 and $50,000 per year. If you've ever heard Tasha Turner, 6-Foot Turner, perform her poetry and talk about how devastating it was to grow up with her mother, who was a 3-pack a day menthol smoker, who would often have to choose, or did choose, between buying a pack of cigarettes and buying milk. And my own struggle with tobacco was, I was someone who I never quit. Some people can have 1 cigarette once a week or 5 cigarettes a week. I wasn't like that. But the thing that made the difference to me was when one doctor told my brother how our bodies could be improved by quitting smoking. So the tobacco companies, and according to Val and Phil and Carol, looked at the tobacco documents that are at the UCSF Tobacco Institute Library. Those companies intentionally kept this information from us, especially African Americans. But once I had that information, I would do anything to quit. And I sure did. And I'm so glad. It's one of the best things I ever did in my life. Anyway, youth tobacco use here in Santa Clara County has also declined from 9% to 3% since 2009. Now, while youth smoking rates are lower than for adults. Rates are higher for certain populations again.
2 minutes, Ms. Baker.
Okay, 5% of African American youth smoke cigarettes in the past 30 days, and that's according to a student risk factor survey that was conducted in 2018. 4% of Latino youth smoke cigarettes in the past 30 days, and 4% of 11th graders smoke cigarettes in the past 30 days. And while the smoking rate of cigarettes has gone down, we all know that the rate of using e-cigarettes is higher than it's complete reversal. Now that rate of using is higher than for cigarettes. And the main factor in attracting young people and others to use e-cigarettes is the flavor. And guess what flavor is the most popular? Of course, it's the mint and fruit flavors, but the mint flavor is consistently popular. And this, again, is something the tobacco industries have studied. They know the power of menthol tobacco. Here in Santa Clara County, 9% of Latino youth use e-cigarettes. 7% of African American use e-cigarettes. I also saw somewhere where that percentage rate was more around 11%, one study that was done. 9% of 11th graders used e-cigarettes in the past 30 days. So because data on youth tobacco use is not available from all school districts in Santa Clara County, a goal of our strategic plan that I'm reading from today is to identify and address the gaps in data on youth smoking rates. Youth find it shockingly easy to get cigarettes countywide. 37% of middle and high school students found it easy or very easy to obtain cigarettes. Those numbers increase for certain populations. 43% of African American youth and 41% of Latino youth find it easy or fairly easy to obtain. The other danger of smoking is the danger of secondhand smoke. There is no safe level of exposure to secondhand smoke. And in Santa Clara County and throughout the state, about 30 to 40% of African Americans are exposed to secondhand smoke. And we at the county are working with our allies and partners to educate the community. We hope you'll use some of the information you have today to get involved with what's happening at the local level. And I think the next speaker will be talking about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. And so we want to, at this time, thank all of our speakers who provided information. And this is the part of the program where you, our attendees, the community, can get involved. And to facilitate that community discussion, I want to introduce my brother, my friend, my partner in crime as we do the work in this community, our partner with the African American Service Agency here in San Jose, the executive director, Milan Ballatin, who is also a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. So he is going to navigate the next portion of the program by engaging you with your questions, or if you have testimonials, he will direct you on how we would get through the next session. So Milan, it's on you, my brother.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tracy Williams, for your warm introduction. I really like that photo you have of me. Of course, I just celebrated a birthday and I look really, really young there. We're going to go ahead and open up the chat. This is the opportunity which the African American Community Service Agency prides ourselves in making sure that we tell people nowadays, what Shirley Chisholm taught us is bring a folding chair, but now this generation said bring all the furniture to the building. So what we're asking all of you who are with us today is to put your questions in the chat. You will be provided 2 minutes and you will know that your 2 minutes is up because we will have a bell. Can I get an example of our bell? That is your kind, warm welcome, because we want to make sure that we respect everybody's time today and make sure that we get you on to the next Zoom that you probably have to jump to. One of the questions that we noticed in the chat was from Marlene. She said, can you speak to the efforts to control the sale of menthol through zoning regulations? Who can answer that question?
Dr. Phil, go ahead. I'm going to spotlight you as well.
Well, I read that, and hi, Marlene, and thank you, Milan, for that. the zoning question is somewhat problematic. This is somewhat what happened in Oakland, where initially in 2017, all the flavored products were taken off the market, but menthol was given a special venue. If you could had a smoke shop, you could sell menthol cigarettes. It was like a zone, you know. And so what happened in 2017, there were 5 smoke shops. By 2020, there were 55. So setting aside little places for people to go to buy these only allows the tobacco industry to use that loophole to create more of those little places. We need citywide bans. I think this came up, Valerie mentioned, or Carol mentioned in passing, that Chicago passed a 500-foot barrier initially around schools. That was a great first step. But we also had to then figure out how they just go 600 feet and buy a cigarette. So this led to San Francisco, you know, doing citywide things. So I think little zones are not the way to go. We need citywide ordinances in terms of that.
And we're going to spotlight all of our speakers to give them a chance to
Sure.
to be together to answer questions.
Thank you so
And I
much.
did that. I did that.
Thank you so much. We want to see the beautiful faces of our speakers. And that question, actually, I know I look rather young, but these eyes are seasoned. That question was from Lynette. And one of the questions that Lynette followed up on is, what is the impact of menthol on babies in the uterus?
Well, I think, go ahead, Val.
Well, I think that's a wonderful question. It's not one that we hear a lot, asked a lot, but Dr. Phil talked about the permeability of menthol across cell membranes. What that means is it just makes, if you think of cells having a gate, it opens up the gate so that substances can get in. And so there's a lot of opportunities for there to be exchanges between chemicals in the mom, between, you know, baby and mom through the placenta. So whatever the mom gets, the baby's going to get. But also I do know that the tobacco industry studied where nicotine traveled in tissue, and they looked at fetuses, not in humans, but they looked at animal models, and they saw where nicotine was crossing over and still being able to be accumulate in tissues containing melanin. So if we're talking about Black children, we know that we have melanin and so our babies, and you're not going to find anybody who's going to be able to support that. You have to go into the confidential in-house studies of the tobacco industry to get that. The government wouldn't fund our research to do that because it was just so controversial. But just because we're not studying it doesn't mean that it's not there available through the industry's work.
Thank you for that. Lumisha Brown has a question. What is the rate of African-American youth are vaping, and how can we deter them?
This is a great question. I'll take the first stab at it. I think even in the last 3 to 4 years, this had changed. Initially, when this started, I mean, you know, stepping back, what's being smoked in the Black community are Cools and Newports, flavored little cigars, Black and Milds and Swisher Sweets, and marijuana. That's generally what's being smoked in the Black community. What has crept in, and this is toward your point and that question's point, is our electronic cigarettes. And I like to look at it this way, and I think it's even changed since I first came up with this analogy. It reminded me of the skateboards. So when skateboards first came out in the 1970s or so, it was white kids that had skateboards. Today, all kids use skateboards. Everybody uses a skateboard. So I think it's penetrating our community. And of course, there's all these flavors. I think there's another thing going on, and that is blunt wrappers. Blunt wrappers essentially are flavored tobacco products that allow you to roll marijuana in it. That's another thing that's going on in the Black community. So I think the idea of is vaping. Yeah, vaping's on the way. It's the addiction of the 21st century. I'll leave it at that. I don't have any recent data on it, but I'm sure that it has increased.
Yes, our data showed that it was somewhere between 6 and 11%.
I was going to say 11%. I saw that just nationally.
Did you? And I think someone also asked, how can you prevent kids from, accessing this, especially our kids? It's so important to stay in touch with your children and make it. There's actually some very good guidance on how to talk to your child about e-cigarettes. Phil, I don't know if you know that information. Stanford University has a tobacco toolkit, and the advice is, to keep your kids engaged in conversation about what's going on. Know the signs also, because it's not like a normal cigarette where you come in and your clothes are all smelling, tobacco, like tobacco. So that's a hint. But no, they're smelling sweet and fruity. And I've even heard some parents say, "Oh, I like that smell," but they were pretty much ignorant of what was going on. And the sad thing about it, there's also behavioral problems that go along with kids starting to vape.
And that is such an important point, Paula. I appreciate you bringing that up about the flavors and having the vape products. And we also have an initiative that many people are undertaking across the country called the buffer zone. So the AATCLC had the buffer zone as one of its main tactics, and maybe Carol can talk a little bit more about that. But essentially, it involves creating what is essentially a perimeter around the stores where the kids can get a hold of these things that you're talking about, to keep them prohibiting stores from selling things within that perimeter. So that will help with keeping
Tracy, we kind of went past this. I'm gonna let Carol go with that. We actually have to get them out of the stores.
Right.
Go ahead, Carol.
So so Chicago, initially nothing was happening when I mentioned we were going to have civil disobedience, Dr. Phil and I, and Chicago came online and they created the buffer zone, which is what we thought that was the best we could do, which was creating a 500-foot radius where none of these products could be sold. And in a city like Chicago, that was very dense. That was the beginning. So Chicago implemented that law, promptly sued by the industry, litigated it, prevailed, and that opened the door for what we see now. So now we've moved past buffer zones and we want whole cities. So we don't want the zoning, we don't want adult only, we want citywide, like San Francisco's the model, that these products cannot be sold anywhere in the city. So now in the city of San Francisco, you cannot buy a pack of Newports. And that's what we're doing. So we're, and this thing accelerated so fast that beyond our own dreams of what could be done. And so now the state of California has done the whole state, and the industry has collected signatures. So that will be a referendum that will be on the ballot probably November this year, 2021, because of Gavin Newsom's recall. And that's where you're going to soon see the inundation of all the misinformation about what we're doing and the flipping of their racist predation on us and flipping it, saying that to take this deadly product out the market is hurting Black people, and Black people need their menthol. So my brother smokes a Newport, and I would not march for him to get those products. I wouldn't in any way support him smoking Newport cigarettes. I would support him getting cessation. I would support all of the things that are supportive of Black smokers. And no one loves Black smokers more than the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council.
And if we heard you correctly for our attendees, that the buffer zone is not where we are pushing in regards to, we're pushing
citywide,
exactly.
all the way, all the way, baby, all the way.
For the sake of clarity, I was mentioning it from a historical perspective. So I was trying to get to that as part of the evolution.
Yes.
Yes. So, that's the word, evolution. We have evolved.
Okay.
Yes.
And so when we're talking about our African American youth, and we're talking about a generation that they have their own language nowadays. I've been around the college student learning that their word is tap in. So when we talk about language and communicating with the young people, how are we, to communicate these things? They're using TikTok and social media to really get these messages out. Are there recommendations that you can give our audience today that they should look further into with their organizations, their neighborhood, and their professional doings?
That
I
sounds
think
like a
we'll,
Nicole or Tracy question.
but before Nicole and Tracy do that, one thing
And thank you,
we
Paula.
don't have,
You're welcome.
Milan, one thing that we don't have, and this is why it's a Nicole and Tracy question, is we need influencers. The tobacco industry identifies influencers on social media and get them to promote their products. Personally, I don't have any influence. I don't know anybody on social media with my old self. But your point's well, Milan. We have to work those sides of the street. I'm working with a group in Atlanta, and I see that my man's on, and they've actually got Facebook, Twitter account, and another something, and another something. Yeah, and it's working out fine, and they're getting their message out. So we have to begin to use these, and then the word tap in. Yeah, no,
And before Tracy and Nicole weigh in, we fought hard for Proposition 56, which is our tobacco tax that was passed a few years ago. So we now have revenue and resources. So in every city, and Paula can weigh in on this, every city and every county, we have youth coalitions. We have opportunities for youth to engage, to get stipends, to get money, to learn how to advocate for themselves, to learn how to speak for themselves. And so it's an educational process of giving them skills that are transferable to anything that they want to do, including going to college, resume writing, referrals, letters of support. So there are all kinds of entities through us, through the California Department of Education, their tobacco use prevention and education programs, and our children are participating the way other kids are. So that's something that we need to beef up because it's an excellent opportunity. And everybody knows if you're a parent, half of parenting is keeping your children busy.
Yeah,
So to keep them busy with something positive. Yes.
and I talked to a young man at Juneteenth a couple of years ago, and he had experimented with e-cigarettes, and his mother did a great thing. She turned it right around on him and had him research, completely research the impact of e-cigarettes. And so this little brother ended up having to give a speech to his charter school and everything else. But those are the kind of leaders we need to grow leadership among our young people.
And we also have a number of cessation resources on our website through our other program called Amplify. So we do a number of things to support folks who are trying to give up smoking and vaping and trying to talk to their kids, etc. The other thing that I'll share is that from time to time, we do presentations for groups of young people. So I recently presented to the Berkeley High School African American psychology class and talked about the effects of I talked about how the tobacco industry utilizes an understanding of how psychology works to influence the choices that we make. So we talked about consumerism, we talked to train them about media, and we also let them know that those things that they're seeing their friends indulge in, or they may be indulging in, like Dr. Phil mentioned earlier, the blunt wrappers like Backwoods, which are very popular with kids, that's all part of the tobacco industry, and that all these vape products, et cetera, it's all from the same source, and it's all giving them the same, exposing them to the same harm. And the same goes for hookahs. So the hookah lounges are very popular. There are some in Contra Costa County that have been scrutinized and busted because they've been letting in young people. And they're
cute too.
Right. Right. So sorry, we had to mute someone. But I thought they were saying that the hookah lounges were cute. I'm like, I mean, I guess.
Well, that's one of the things that draws in.
They are cute,
right?
But they are cute, but the kids can go in there.
Right.
Right. So long story short, we're paying attention to those things.
And can you go ahead and put the website in the chat so that folks can click? Okay, perfect. We want to go ahead. We only have a few more minutes, and I want to go ahead and get as many questions as possible. Nora, would you like to come on and ask your question? You would have 2 minutes.
Sure. I posted it in the chat. Let me find it.
At 6:57.
I was wondering, what are some of the barriers that prevent the removal of these cigarettes from the market?
Well, let me take a stab at that. Newport, which is the #1 selling menthol cigarette, and it's number 2 overall, but it's catching up. It's going to be number 1 soon, was manufactured by this little company called Lorillard. And we didn't get into all of the marketing pieces, but Newport was sold by Lorillard to R.J. Reynolds, which used to manufacture Salem. And Newport was bought for $27 billion. I want to say 2017. I don't have my notes here, but just recently it was bought by R.J. Reynolds. And then R.J. Reynolds turned around in less than 2 years and sold it to British American Tobacco for $59 billion or $53 billion. So that right there, that's why it's not going anywhere. It's a huge investment for these companies, and they're doing everything they possibly can. And the reason why menthol is so important to the industry is because basically college educated, white, affluent people aren't smoking at the rates that they used to. So the sale of non-menthol cigarettes has been declining for a good 20 years now. But menthol cigarettes have been increasing, and that's where the profit lies for an industry that is as big and as powerful as the tobacco industry. And it's Black folks that's helping to keep the industry alive. So it's an economic thing. And I'm sure, Dr. Phil and Carol may want to add something else to that.
Only thing I would add, Val, I like the way you said it. It's keeping the industry alive while it's killing us. They need to replace smokers every year. And you made the other important point that I think we have we have data on this. Cigarette smoking has been going down for the last 25 years. Menthol cigarette use has increased over the last 10 years. And it's increased with young people, Black people, women, Latinos, Asians. It's the new cigarette. Let me just do the quick math. The report out in 2017-18 said that the tobacco industry in the United States was a $220 billion industry. FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, will tell you that 36% of that is menthol cigarettes. That's why it's hard to get it off the market. That's why the tobacco industry spends tens of millions of dollars fighting us. We have to fight them on all levels. At the federal level, we have to sue them. We have to fight at the state level, the county level. And I would hope that the cities that are watching tonight, that we can move forward with getting rid of these products citywide.
Thank you. Pam, would you like to come on and ask your question?
She placed her question in the chat. It says she's asking for a recommendation for starting their campaign against big tobacco on the flavor referendum, which will probably be in November. It's actually going to be, if you're talking about SB 793, it's going to be next year. But for the flavor ordinances in the city of San Jose will happen in April. But you were asking for how to start the campaign, right? And then you were also asking, do you address menthol separately or part of the whole flavor package? And I can tell you right now, menthol is a flavor, so it is addressed. It should not be separated or left out.
Correct.
And sure, I was looking actually towards the, it's anticipated now that if there's enough signatures gathered for the recall, that we might be addressing the referendum on flavored tobacco products as early as November. So I'm looking for a recommendation on how to start that. And while I absolutely agree that menthol is a flavor, I didn't know if there was a philosophy from this group. I know there'll be pushback, from market segments. I didn't know if you had some strategies you'd recommend on keeping menthol together, or the answer is yes, menthol, yes, and flavors as a package. I wonder what you guys thought. Thank you.
That's what we say is menthol and all flavors. So menthol leads, and menthol is a flavor, and menthol's got to be included in anything that deals with flavors. And I want to really be clear that the state bill, which was Senate Bill 793, initially it would have been on the ballot in November of 2022, but now it's almost certain that it will be on the ballot this year. So that just in a few months, we will be having the referendum to decide if the state of California will keep the statewide law that was passed and signed into law June 20th by Gavin Newsom. So that's going to be the big Armageddon fight that I was talking about. And the way that we've started, Pam, so this is part of that. And the way that we have to do it is we have to really educate and engage our people, because we cannot lobby with public dollars, but we share factual information, which is what we're sharing right now, so that when you get hit with the misinformation, you will know that it is a lie. So when you get something in the mail that says Senate Bill 793 is racist, what was racist was when they left menthol in the first place. And what would be racist would be to undo the law that has already been passed by the state of California to take these deadly products off the market. So it's tricky, and a lot of games are going to be played. And our antidote to that is to have educated people who know the deal. So there's no soundbite for this. This is a conversation, and people need to be thoroughly educated so they really understand what we're talking about. And that's the purpose of what we're doing tonight. And that
Thank
we're
you.
so grateful for, eternally
Yeah.
grateful.
Well, thank you very much to our amazing panel. Of course, it is our time, and we want to thank all of our panelists. Please give them some love in the chat. And we want to conclude this portion of the program by thanking you, the community members who asked these important questions. And thank, of course, our host, San Jose Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta, and AAT CLC for this wonderful program. I'm going to hand it over to Tracy and Tracy.
TNT.
And we're back, right? And so we're back. And so at this time, we're going to wrap up the program, but we have some specific ask and some call to action. And so as a community, you might say, and there were some good questions out there, what can I do now? And some of the things that you can do is you can write letters to your elected officials. There's a packet, if it wasn't already dropped or attached in the chat, it will be dropped in the chat. There's some sample letters in there to help you with your letter writing and getting prepared to send things to your elected officials. Attend your council meetings. Everybody who's in attendance tonight or that registered, as soon as we find out the council meeting where San Jose is going to be dealing with this topic, we'll send the email, we'll let you know what the meeting date and time is. And so you'll be informed on that council meeting so that you can attend, you can share your opinion, your thoughts with our elected officials on the council. Another thing is continue to educate yourself. When you see things, take the initiative to continue to inform yourself on this issue so that you can help others be informed in your surroundings, and encourage your loved ones. If you have loved ones who are smokers, who are using menthol flavored products, you want to encourage them to seek out cessation services and to get resources on that level. And so that's how we can do it here in San Jose. That's some of our ask, and I'm going to have Tracy kind of follow up on a bigger picture of some specific actions that we can take.
Now, you see this lovely picture of a lovely pastry. This is not an action towards tobacco control. I mean, I guess it could help you stop smoking, but that's going in the wrong direction. This is a picture of a millefeuille. It is a pastry that they make on one of my favorite shows of all time, the Great British Baking Show. And it's the important thing about this pastry is making sure that you get butter at every layer. So you put this butter in the dough and you have to fold the dough over multiple times, but you have to make sure that the butter is well incorporated so that you get all of the beautiful flaky layers. And I like to say that our approach to tobacco control is much like the butter in this pastry. We make sure that we are reaching every single layer. So my soror Tracy talked about tobacco control on the local level. So we will go so far as to help educate people about how to approach getting smoke-free housing enacted in their apartment buildings, but also we educate people about why it's important to show up at the city level at the city council meetings, at the county supervisor meetings. And also we talked a little bit about SB 793, which is actually coming up this year. For a while, it wasn't 100% certain that it would come up this year. So now we know that this referendum is on the ballot, and the tobacco industry is pulling out all the stops to ensure that they have a successful outcome. So the reality is you're taking the first step by being here tonight, educating yourself on the reality of the issues, but also making sure that you share the information that you receive this evening. As Tracy stated, you will get a attendance packet. We've already placed it in the chat. You will also have it emailed to you. Go through that packet, read that information, share it broadly. Also, feel free to contact us. We do a number of presentations. You can stay abreast of what we're doing through our website, but you can also contact us if your organization or a group of organizations in your area wants to host a similar event like this, so that we can reach as many people as possible throughout the state to help educate people on the reality of things. Fighting against disinformation. Actually, they say whatever you fight against gets stronger. So what I'll say is working and fighting on behalf of truth is what we do in order to dismantle the disinformation that's out there about the issues that we've been discussing this evening. On a national level, the AATCLC, as well as the Action on Smoking and Health, have taken the bold step of suing the FDA, and in order to call attention to the fact that they have fallen short in their responsibility to protect the Black community from the tobacco industry. So that suit is active currently, and you can read more about it in our information packet. Additionally, we are working at the international level. We have an exhibition called The Same Game, Different Smokers. I'm the curator of said exhibition, but the title is timely because no matter where you go all over the world, the tobacco industry is utilizing the very same tactics. It is our assertion, and we have written to the United Nations to state that the tobacco industry is in violation of the Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, which is actually a treaty. So it is our assertion that the tobacco industry is in violation of international treaties in their targeting of the Black community, because it is a form of racial discrimination, and they are carrying it out in various places all over the world. So we are working to hit every single level that we can. Now, the reality is in your packet, you will also get a chance to see the list of folks who spoke this evening. So the contact information for them is there. If you have additional questions or you'd like some additional information about what was shared here this evening, that is a way that you can get in touch with folks. And they are wonderful community partners with which you can also host additional events and work to get the word out. So I'll close by saying that there's a song by Bob Marley, right? It's called The Small Axe. And the song says, if you are a big tree, we are the small axe, sharpened to cut you down, well sharp to cut you down. So it's my assertion that we are the small axe. The tobacco industry throws all this money at this issue trying to be successful. And the reality is, because of the fact that we're working at each and every one of those levels, and because of the fact that we are a strong unit, we are working together with communities. We got kids coming out with signs that are literally made with crayons and markers. Folks just getting out marching. We talked about PAVE, the group with moms, and we got the coalition through the AATCLC, and we're activating the Black church, and we're really joining together with people in the fight to ensure the health and safety of our communities. We're that small axe that just keeps chopping away at that big tree to take it down. So know that the things that we do at the local level affect everybody at the global level. Everybody is watching us in California, and we have an opportunity to make history by pushing to make sure that this referendum and that is not successful, that the tobacco industry is not successful with this referendum, setting example for people not only in the country but throughout the world. So we are actually going to pivot to my colleague, one of our newest members of the AATCLC, Miss Nicole Turkson, who is going to take it on home for us.
All right. Thank you so much, Tracy. And thank you to everyone who was a part of our program tonight. Dr. Val, Dr. Phil, Carol, Milan, Paula, TNT, Tracy and Tracy, everyone who was part of this awesome program. Thank you to you first and foremost. Thank you to everyone who attended. We really appreciate you being here with us on this Thursday evening. We know that you probably have so many other conflicting priorities, but the fact that you're here with us tonight means so much. To wrap it all up, I'm not going to sing for you like Tracy did, but I am going to direct you to a few steps that that can help you continue to engage with us and continue this really important conversation. First of all, we would really, really appreciate it if each and every single person who participated on this call could take a second to complete our post-event survey. This evaluation survey really helps us to get feedback from you all on how we can improve our work moving forward. One of the questions that was posed earlier was, how do we engage our youth, specifically Black and Brown youth, on this issue better? We want to hear from you about that. What are your suggestions on how we can make it sexy, as Carol would say, for our kids, so that we can kind of combat more powerfully against the billions and billions of dollars that the tobacco industry can use to capture the attention of our kids, and not just our kids, but our community at large. So please, we have a QR code on the screen right here. If people are familiar with how to do that, you just open your camera up on your phone. And if you capture the QR code, it will take you directly to the survey. I believe someone should be dropping a link in the chat, and then never fear, you will receive all of this information as promised in our follow-up email that will be coming out very soon. By the end of the week is what we're shooting for. So follow us on social media to stay involved. We have your email, so please, we're going to be adding you to our e-blast. So watch out for more flyers and informational invites for more presentations like this, and continue to have this conversation and just share this information with everyone that you know. Like Carol said, we're probably going to be voting on this very soon, sooner than what we expected. So this issue really needs to be on the top of our priority list. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
This was great.
Thank you, Nicole.
Everything
Thank
was
you, everyone.
All right.
Great
Wonderful,
presentation,
wonderful
everybody.
event.
Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank
Very
you,
nice.
everybody. All
Thank
righty.
you.
We'll be in touch. Great effort, our team.
Tracy, you rock.
No, yes, all
TNT.
the Tracys, all the
All the Tracys.
Tracys.
Yes.